You know, my friends, one of the most dangerous habits that silently destroys our ability to earn respect is ego, that small, invisible monster inside that keeps whispering, "You're better than them. You already know everything." It sounds harmless, but it quietly ruins relationships, learning, and growth. Ego is like a fog. It blocks your vision while making you believe you can still see clearly. And the most interesting part, the more ego you have, the less you can see it. Let me share something simple but powerful. Have you ever met someone who can't take advice? The moment you say something, they reply, "I already know that." You try to guide them, but their ego becomes a wall. These are the people who stop growing, not because life stopped teaching, but because they stopped listening. A mind full of ego has no room for wisdom. One day, a young man came to me and said, "Sir, I don't understand why people don't respect me. I'm educated, talented, and I've achieved so much more than others." I smiled and said, "You have achieved more, but maybe that's the problem. Your success has made you forget what it means to be a student." He looked confused. I continued, "The moment you think you've learned everything, life quietly walks away with its lessons." In life, my friends, people don't respect the loudest or the smartest, they respect the humblest. You can have a PhD, but if you don't have humility, people will hesitate to learn from you. You can be rich, but if you talk down to others, your wealth becomes noise, not inspiration. Respect grows when people feel seen, heard, and valued, and ego prevents you from doing that. Think about this in your daily life. Suppose you're at work and someone younger than you suggests a new idea. What's your first reaction? "I've been here longer. What can they teach me?" That's ego speaking. But the moment you say, "That's an interesting thought, tell me more," you gain not only an idea but respect. Because respect is mutual, it grows where openness exists. I remember once traveling with a driver who taught me something I'll never forget. On a long journey, he said, "Sir, do you know why a car's windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror?" I smiled and said, "Tell me," he said. "Because where we're going is more important than where we've been." I was amazed. Such wisdom from a man who never went to college. Ego would have made me think, "What can a driver teach me?" But humility allowed me to learn. That's how we grow. Ego not only blocks learning, but also breaks relationships. How many times have we seen families break apart? Not because of lack of love, but because no one wants to say, "I'm sorry." The ego says, "Why should I apologize? They should come first." But humility whispers, "Does it matter who's right when the relationship is at stake?" I've seen marriages fall apart because two people were too proud to bend. But remember, my friends, a tree that cannot bend with the wind will eventually break. Even in friendships, ego is a slow poison. Imagine you help a friend and one day they succeed more than you. Ego says, "Why them? I deserve that." Humility says, "I'm happy for them." The one who can genuinely clap for others when they win, that's the person everyone respects. Because ego competes, but humility celebrates. In today's world, everyone wants to be seen as somebody. We post, we show, we prove. But the people who truly earn respect are not those shouting their worth. They're the ones quietly living with grace. You know why? Because humility has a fragrance. You can't see it, but you can feel it. Ego is like perfume. It announces itself loudly. But humility is like a natural scent, gentle, lasting, and real. I once met an elderly monk who told me something beautiful. He said, "The higher a tree grows, the deeper its roots must go. In the same way, the higher you rise in life, the more humble you must become." Success without humility is like a balloon without a string. It rises fast, but can burst at any moment. But when you tie success to humility, it stays grounded, steady, and respected. Let's take an everyday example. Imagine a leader in an office. One leader walks in shouting orders. "Do this, finish that, why are you late?" People obey out of fear, not respect. Another leader walks in and says, "How are you today? Is everything okay? Let's get this done together." People don't just obey, they admire. That's the difference between authority and respect. Ego creates authority, humility creates respect. Sometimes, ego hides in subtle ways. For example, when someone criticizes us and we immediately defend ourselves, or when we interrupt others to prove our point, or when we silently feel superior to someone because of their job, looks, or background, these small thoughts are ego's footprints. The moment you start noticing them, you've already begun removing them. So, how do we remove ego? By practicing gratitude. When you start your day by saying, "Thank you for what I have," you automatically acknowledge that life is bigger than your achievements. When someone corrects you, instead of feeling insulted, feel grateful. Because correction is a form of care. When you make a mistake, don't cover it, admit it. People don't lose respect when you make mistakes. They lose respect when you pretend you don't. At the end of the day, ego is the mask we wear to hide our insecurity. But when you remove the mask, you discover something far more powerful: authenticity. And authenticity attracts genuine respect. So, my dear friends, if you truly want to earn respect, don't try to be the one who knows it all. Be the one who's willing to learn it all. The more you grow in humility, the more people will look at you and say, "There's something different about this person." Not loud, not proud, but peaceful. Respect doesn't come to those who stand tall with arrogance. It comes to those who bow with grace. My friends, one of the easiest ways to lose respect, not from the world, but from yourself, is through the habit of blaming. You see, blaming others may give momentary comfort, but it silently steals your power. Every time we say, "It's not my fault," what we're really saying is, "I'm not in control." And people don't respect those who constantly play the victim. They respect those who take charge of their own life. Think about it. From childhood, we start learning this habit. A child breaks a vase and quickly says, "It wasn't me." We grow up, but the habit grows with us. We fail an exam and say, "The teacher doesn't like me." We lose a job and say, "My boss was unfair." We fight in relationships and say, "It's always their fault." The words change, but the mindset remains the same. What we don't realize is that blaming others may save our ego, but it costs us our growth. I once met a young man who was deeply frustrated. He said, "Sir, my life is full of problems. My parents never supported me. My boss never appreciates me. And my friends are fake." I looked at him and asked, "If everyone around you is wrong, Then who's the common factor? He paused. You, I said gently, are the only constant in every story you tell. He looked down and smiled painfully. You see, it's easy to point fingers outward, but every finger we point forward has three fingers pointing back at us. Let me tell you a simple truth. As long as you blame, you stay the same. But the day you take responsibility, your life begins to change. Responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault. It means you accept that you have the power to respond. That's why it's called responsibility. When you accept responsibility, you take back the steering wheel of your life. Let's take an example from daily life. Imagine you're driving and suddenly another driver cuts in front of you. Your immediate reaction might be to shout, "What's wrong with people these days?" You fume, you rant, and your entire mood gets ruined. But who suffers? The other driver has gone on with his life. You're the one carrying the anger. The moment you say, "Okay, maybe he's in a hurry, maybe he's stressed," you shift your focus. You choose peace over blame. That's the power of responsibility. It puts your emotions back in your hands. At work, the same principle applies. Suppose a project fails. It's tempting to say, "My team didn't cooperate," or "The client changed their mind." But true leaders say, "What could I have done better?" That one question turns failure into feedback, because every failure holds a lesson, but only for those willing to look within. People respect such individuals because they don't waste time in complaints, they invest energy in correction. I remember a story from my college days. Two students failed an exam. The first said, "The teacher is unfair." The second said, "I didn't prepare enough." The first one stayed bitter. The second one studied harder and topped the next test. The difference wasn't in intelligence, it was in accountability. The first one blamed, the second one owned, and that's why one gained sympathy while the other gained success. Blame is easy because it feels safe. When we blame others, we protect our self-image. But the truth is, growth never happens in comfort. When we stop blaming, we start learning. And the world respects learners far more than complainers. In relationships too, this habit of blame can quietly destroy the foundation of love. Imagine two partners constantly saying, "You never understand me," or "You're the reason I'm unhappy." Slowly, love turns into a competition of who's right instead of a journey of what's right. I once told a couple who came to me for advice, "Don't focus on who started the fire, focus on who's willing to bring the water." Because in the end, relationships don't fail because of mistakes, they fail because of the refusal to take responsibility. Blame also hides behind comparison. We say, "He's successful because he had better opportunities. She's lucky because she had support." What we're really doing is justifying our inaction. The truth is, no one's journey is easy. Everyone faces obstacles. But those who earn respect are the ones who rise despite the odds, not the ones who explain why they couldn't. When you take responsibility, something magical happens. You start respecting yourself. You feel powerful because you realize, "I can change this." And when you respect yourself, others naturally follow. People admire those who face challenges head on instead of hiding behind excuses. Let me share a small story. Once, two farmers were hit by a storm that destroyed their crops. One said, This is unfair. The government should have helped. He spent days complaining and did nothing. The other said, this is tough, but I can't control the weather. I'll plant again. Months later, one field remained barren, and the other was full of new crops. The difference wasn't the storm, it was the mindset. Life is like that. Storms will come. Unfair bosses, broken trust, failed plans. You can either keep blaming the storm, or you can learn to dance in the rain. The choice defines who you become. There's a beautiful quote. You can't wash your hands of responsibility and expect your character to stay clean. When we blame, we dirty our own character, but when we own up, even in failure, we become worthy of admiration. If you think about the people you respect most, maybe a teacher, a mentor, or a friend, chances are they never blame others for their situations. They take responsibility quietly, they correct themselves humbly, and they keep moving forward. That's what makes them stand tall in your eyes. So, my friends, the next time something goes wrong, before you say, who's to blame? Ask instead, what can I learn? That one shift in mindset will transform your relationships, your career, and your peace of mind. Because the truth is, simple blaming keeps you stuck in the past, while responsibility drives you toward the future. When you stop blaming others, you stop waiting for change and start becoming the change. And that's when respect flows naturally. Because the world bows not to the perfect, but to the accountable. My friends, anger is one of the most expensive emotions we can afford. It costs us peace, it costs us relationships, and most importantly, it costs us respect. People often confuse fear with respect. When someone raises their voice, others might fall silent, not out of admiration, but out of discomfort. Anger might make people obey you for a moment, but it will never make them honor you. Respect and anger can never live in the same home. Anger is like fire. It can cook your food, or it can burn your house down. A little controlled anger, directed toward discipline and change, can be productive. But uncontrolled anger, that quick spark that turns into flames, can destroy everything you've built. And the sad part is, the one who burns the most in that fire is you. Let me share a simple story. Once, a monk and his disciple were walking near a river. They saw two people shouting at each other. The disciple asked, "Master, why do people shout when they're angry?" The monk smiled and said, "Because when two hearts grow distant, their voices must go louder to reach each other. But when they are close, even a whisper is enough." My friends, anger creates distance. Every angry word pushes someone further away from your heart. In daily life, we often justify anger. We say, "I was angry because I care," or "they needed to be taught a lesson." But anger doesn't teach, it only triggers. When we shout, people stop listening to our words and start defending their hearts. You may win the argument, but you lose the person. And what kind of victory is that? Think about the last time you got angry. Maybe you were stuck in traffic. Maybe someone at work made a mistake. Or maybe a loved one said something hurtful. For a few seconds, anger made you feel powerful, didn't it? Your heart raced, your voice grew stronger, and you felt in control. But a few minutes later, that power turned into guilt or regret. That's what anger does. It gives a momentary illusion of strength, followed by a lasting sense of weakness. Once, A man came to me and said, Gaur Gopal Das, I can't control my temper. I get angry so easily. I asked him, what happens when you get angry? He said, I shout, I throw things, and later I apologize. I smiled and said, so you're not losing your temper, you're losing your respect, one apology at a time. You see, anger might feel natural, but it's not necessary. It doesn't prove your strength, it reveals your lack of control. I remember a beautiful lesson from a small child. One day, I saw a boy building a sandcastle by the beach. A wave came and washed it away. For a moment, he looked sad. But within seconds, he smiled and started building it again. I asked him, aren't you angry that the waves destroyed your castle? He laughed and said, the sea can take away my castle, but it can't take away my hands. What a profound message. Life will destroy your plans. People may upset you. Things will not go your way. But if you lose your calm, you lose your ability to rebuild. In families, anger often becomes the silent killer of love. A father shouts at his child, thinking it will make the child disciplined. A husband yells at his wife, thinking it will make her listen. A manager screams at his team, thinking it will make them more efficient. But the truth is, anger doesn't create discipline. It creates fear, and fear may bring obedience, but never respect. When you lead with calmness, people follow you willingly. When you lead with anger, they follow you reluctantly. I once met a teacher who was loved by all her students. She told me, I've never raised my voice in class because when you teach with kindness, students learn with love. That day, I realized control doesn't come from shouting louder, it comes from speaking softer. Let's think about how anger affects us personally. After an angry outburst, notice how your body feels. The tightness in your chest, the headache, the exhaustion. It's almost as if your body is punishing you for losing peace. Doctors even say that chronic anger damages the heart, raises blood pressure, and shortens lifespan. Isn't it ironic? We get angry to prove we're right, but in doing so, we hurt ourselves the most. The question is, how can we overcome anger? The answer lies not in suppression, but in awareness. When you feel anger rising, pause for just 3 seconds. Take a deep breath. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, will this reaction make things better or worse? Most of the time, that little pause will save you from a big regret. Remember, silence in anger is not weakness, it's wisdom. There's a story of a wise man who gave a small nail to a young boy and said, every time you get angry, hammer a nail into this wooden fence. The boy did as told. After a few weeks, the fence was full of nails. Then the wise man said, now every time you control your anger, remove one nail. Slowly, the boy removed all the nails. The wise man smiled and said, look at the fence. Even though you removed the nails, the holes remain. That's what anger does. It leaves scars. So, my friends, before you let anger take over, remember the fence. You might say sorry later, but some scars never fade. People may forgive you, but they rarely forget how you made them feel. Imagine how different our world would be if more people chose calm over chaos. If drivers smiled instead of honking, if bosses encouraged instead of yelling, if families talked instead of shouting, we would not just have more peace, we'd have more respect. You earn respect when you can stay calm in chaos. People look at you and think, How can they stay so composed when everything is falling apart? That's true strength, not the ability to shout, but the ability to stay silent when silence is needed most. In the end, anger is a choice. So is peace. Every time you choose peace, you rise higher in people's eyes. Not because you're perfect, but because you're aware. When you master your temper, you master your respect. So, the next time anger comes knocking, smile and say, "Not today," because your calmness is your crown, and every time you wear it, the world bows, not to your power, but to your peace. My friends, one of the most silent destroyers of respect is gossip. It's a habit so common, so subtle, that we often don't even realize when we're doing it. A small comment here, a casual remark there, and before we know it, we've turned someone's reputation into a topic of entertainment. Gossip might seem harmless, even fun, but it slowly eats away at our integrity, our peace, and the respect people have for us. Because the truth is simply, if people know you gossip about others, they will never fully trust you. Gossip is like smoke. It travels fast, fills every corner, and leaves behind the smell of burnt trust. And the worst part, once it leaves your mouth, you can't take it back. Words are like arrows. Once released, they can't return. And in that process, you may win attention, but you lose admiration. I remember once someone asked me, Gaur Gopal Das, why do people enjoy gossiping so much? I smiled and said, because it gives them a temporary illusion of importance. When we talk about someone else's flaws, failures, or secrets, we feel momentarily superior. It makes us feel like we know something others don't. But that feeling fades quickly, leaving behind emptiness and guilt. You see, gossip feeds the ego but starves the soul. Let's think about it in daily life. You're sitting with friends, and someone brings up another person's name. Did you hear what happened with him? You know what she did last week. It starts with curiosity, continues with laughter, and ends with judgment. You feel entertained for a few minutes, but afterward, you sense something heavy in your heart. That heaviness is your conscience whispering, "You could have chosen better words." Now imagine the same group of friends, but instead of gossiping, you uplift each other. You share ideas, dreams, lessons. You walk away inspired instead of drained. One conversation plants negativity, while the other plants respect. That's the difference. People remember how they feel around you. If your words make them doubt others, they will one day doubt you too. There's a powerful saying, if they gossip with you, they'll gossip about you. It's true. The person who enjoys gossiping with you about others will one day discuss you in your absence. That's the nature of gossip. It doesn't stay loyal, and that's why wise people avoid it completely. They protect their peace and the dignity of others. Once, a woman came to a saint and said, "I have spoken badly about someone, and now I regret it. What should I do?" The saint handed her a pillow filled with feathers and said, "Cut it open and scatter the feathers into the wind." She did as told. Then the saint said, "No, go and collect every feather back." The woman said, "That's impossible." The saint smiled and said, "Exactly. Words are like feathers. Once released, you can't gather them again. That's the power of speech. It can either heal or harm, build or break, bless or burn. In our modern world, gossip has become even easier. With one message, one post, one screenshot, a rumor can reach hundreds of people in seconds. We've replaced whispered conversations with forwarded texts. But technology hasn't changed the truth. Spreading gossip, whether through your mouth or your phone, still reflects the same weakness of character. Respectful people think before they speak, and even more before they send. Let's be honest, sometimes we gossip not out of malice, but out of boredom. We crave connection, and gossip feels like a shortcut to bonding. But real connection doesn't come from talking about others. It comes from understanding each other. The next time you feel the urge to gossip, pause and ask yourself, would I say this if that person was sitting next to me? If the answer is no, that's your signal to stop. At work, gossip can be even more destructive. A small rumor about a colleague can damage careers, trust, and team harmony. I once met a manager who told me, I never hire people who gossip. I asked why. He said, because if someone wastes energy spreading negativity, they'll never build anything meaningful. That's so true. Gossiping is not just talking, it's choosing to waste energy that could be used to grow. In relationships, gossip can silently create distance. If you constantly discuss other people's faults with your partner or family, you plant seeds of judgment in their mind. Over time, you'll find your home filled with criticism instead of compassion. Replace gossip with gratitude. Instead of saying, did you see what she did? Try saying, did you notice how strong she's been lately? One spreads light, the other spreads shadow. There's something incredibly powerful about people who refuse to participate in gossip. They may not always be the most talkative, but their presence carries peace. You feel safe around them because you know if they protect others' dignity, they'll protect yours too. That's the kind of person everyone respects, the one whose words are clean, calm, and kind. Let's take an example from a workplace. Imagine two employees, one who spends lunch breaks discussing who got promoted or who made a mistake, and another who spends the same time helping others improve, encouraging ideas, or simply listening. Over time, people may laugh with the first person, but they'll trust the second one. And trust is the foundation of respect. We all know how it feels to be the subject of gossip. That sting in the chest, that disappointment when you hear your name twisted into someone's story. When you remember that feeling, it should be enough to make you promise never to make someone else feel it. Because real maturity is when you can hear gossip and still stay silent, not because you agree, but because you refuse to add fuel to the fire. There's a beautiful quote that says, strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and weak minds discuss people. When you rise above gossip, you automatically rise above smallness. Your mind becomes clearer, your heart becomes lighter, and your respect grows quietly, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through dignity. So, my dear friends, guard your words like you would guard your most precious jewels. Don't let gossip steal your shine. Speak in ways that when you leave a conversation, people feel uplifted, not uneasy. Let your mouth be a fountain of encouragement, not a factory of rumors. Because when you stop talking about people and start talking to them with kindness, you not only gain their respect, you gain their hearts. And that, my friends, is a kind of respect that never fades. My friends, one of the most silent thieves of peace and respect is comparison. It's something almost all of us do, often without realizing it. We look at someone's success, their beauty, their car, their house, their relationship, their followers, and somewhere inside, a small voice says, "Why not me?" That small voice may seem harmless, but if we keep feeding it, it grows into jealousy, insecurity, and sadness. Comparison doesn't inspire growth. It quietly drains our self-worth, and when we lose our inner confidence, we lose the respect of others too. Let's be honest, comparison is natural in today's world. Everywhere we look, we see someone doing better. On social media, everyone seems happier, wealthier, and more successful. People post their highlights, and we compare them to our behind the scenes moments. We forget that what we see is just a small, edited glimpse, not the full story. You see a picture of a smiling couple, but you don't see the arguments behind that smile. You see a friend's new car, but you don't see the loans behind it. You see someone's promotion, but not the sleepless nights that got them there. When we compare our reality to someone else's appearance, we set ourselves up for misery. I remember once a young man came to me looking very upset. He said, "Sir, all my friends are doing well. One bought a new house, another got married, one is traveling the world. I feel left behind." I smiled and asked him, "Have you ever seen a race where every runner crosses the finish line at the same time?" He laughed and said, "No." I said, "Then why are you expecting your life to run on someone else's timeline?" You see, life is not a competition, it's a journey. Everyone runs their own race, and each race has its own pace. The moment you start looking at others' lanes, you lose focus on your own. There's a beautiful story about a rose and a sunflower. The rose once looked up and said, "I wish I were tall like the sunflower. People could see me from far away." The sunflower smiled and said, "And I wish I had your fragrance, so people would be drawn closer." Both flowers were so busy comparing that they forgot to celebrate their own beauty. My friends, we all have our unique fragrance, our unique height, our unique story. The more we compare, the less we appreciate what we already have. Comparison also steals gratitude. When you constantly think about what others have, you forget what you already possess. You stop counting your blessings because you're busy counting someone else's. And here's the irony: the person you're envying might be envying someone else too. The one you think has a perfect life might be silently wishing they had your peace, your simplicity, or your smile. Everyone is comparing, but no one is content. In daily life, comparison shows up everywhere. A student feels small because their classmate scores higher. A young woman feels insecure because her friend looks more glamorous. A man feels disappointed because his colleague earns more. But here's the truth: marks don't define intelligence, beauty doesn't define worth, and money doesn't define success. What truly defines you is your effort, your honesty, and your character. People respect those who walk their own path with confidence, not those who keep chasing others' shadows. Once, during a seminar, someone asked me, "How do I stop comparing myself to others?" I told him, "Start comparing yourself to your past self. If you're better than the person you were yesterday, that's progress. That's the only healthy comparison. Instead of saying, he has more than me, try saying, I have more peace than I did last year. Instead of thinking, she's doing better, say, I'm growing at my own pace. Respect doesn't come from being better than others. It comes from being better than your old self. Let's take a small example from the kitchen. Imagine you're baking a cake, and halfway through, you start comparing your half-cooked cake to someone else's finished one. You'll feel discouraged and might even stop baking. But if you wait patiently, your cake will rise too, at its own time, in its own way. Life is exactly like that. Everyone's oven temperature is different. Everyone's timing is different. Stop opening your oven just to peek at others. Focus on your recipe, and your cake will turn out just fine. Comparison also damages relationships. When we constantly measure who gives more, who earns more, or who gets more appreciation, love turns into rivalry. I've seen siblings stop talking because of jealousy. I've seen friends drift apart because one became more successful. But real success is when you can look at someone's growth and genuinely smile, knowing that their light doesn't dim yours. The sun never compares itself with the moon. Both shine beautifully in their own time. There's a saying I love: a flower doesn't think about competing with the flower next to it. It just blooms. The same applies to us. When you bloom in your own way, you automatically attract respect. People admire those who are content, confident, and grounded, not those who constantly chase what others have. In today's fast-paced life, comparison is often the cause of silent suffering. People work hard not because they love what they do, but because they're trying to catch up. They post not to express, but to impress. But remember, happiness can never be measured by likes, followers, or applause. True happiness comes from knowing you are enough, right here, right now. When you stop comparing, something beautiful happens. You start appreciating. You appreciate your little victories, your journey, your blessings. You begin to see beauty in your imperfections and pride in your progress. And people start to notice that glow, not of jealousy, but of peace. That glow is what earns respect. So, my dear friends, the next time you catch yourself comparing, pause and remind yourself, I'm not late, I'm not behind, I'm on my own path. The world doesn't need another version of someone else. It needs the best version of you. Because when you truly understand that your life is not a race, your heart becomes calm, your mind becomes grateful, and your presence becomes powerful. And that's when respect naturally flows toward you, not because you outshone others, but because you finally learned to shine as yourself.